Jujutsu Kaisen is unique in the modern shonen era, as instead of having one shonen protagonist, it arguably has two-ish: Yuji Itadori and Yuta Okkutsu. We've been following both of them since the start, and even before the very start of Jujutsu Kaisen's manga, and we've seen both of them progress throughout the story until they've become strong enough to fight alongside each other in the battle against the King of Curses himself, Ryoma and Sukuna. But if the two of them were to fight, who would actually win? Sukuna's long-lost nephew or the wielder of boundless cursed energy? Let's find out. For this video, we'll be using Yuji post-awakening from chapter 256 and both base form Yuta as well as Yuta alongside Rika. There's also Yuta using Gojo's body with Kenjaku's curse technique that I'll talk about at the end, but at that point he's almost essentially a different character with no connection to the previous scaling of Yuta. As I'll be using one version of Itadori, we'll be going over his scaling and hacks first before covering each version of Yuta and how he compares to current Yuji. If you do like this kind of stuff, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's jump right in. Now, for the longest time, Yuji's versatility in combat was incredibly limited. Besides his immense basic physical capabilities, higher than average luck with black flashes, and ability to see the contours of the soul, Yuji was missing many of the major powers in the verse, including a curse technique, domain expansion, simple domain, or reverse curse technique. Still, even without these abilities, by the time of the Culling Games, Yuji was already stronger than like 90% of the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. Not only could he beat grade 1 sorcerers without even having cursed energy, but with it, even weaker versions of himself could take on and defeat individual disaster curses, at least when getting a little assistance. However, before the training arc time skip preceding Shinjuku Showdown, Yuji is clearly hard capped below the level of special grade sorcerers, and comes off like a low budget version of Maki, having really no counter or win condition against something like a domain expansion or even just a powerful curse technique. However, after doing numerous types of training, including swapping bodies with both Kusakabe and Yuta, not only did Yuji become massively stronger, but he also gained pretty much every major ability he was missing and then some. Firstly, eating the death paintings gave him the same blood manipulation abilities as Chozo, and by using black flashes against Sukuna, Yuji awakened just like Gojo did and unlocked the use of Sukuna's curse technique, aka Shrine. However, Yuji wasn't done there, as he learned reverse curse technique, allowing him to heal from essentially all non-fatal damage. However, he can use this in tandem with blood manipulation to attach entire limbs that might get cut off, while minimizing the amount of cursed energy he has to deplete to do so. In fact, due to the nature of how he gained his abilities, he has a drastically more efficient method of creating RCT, allowing him to use it far more efficiently than other sorcerers. Yuji also learned and awakened two different respective domain techniques, having both simple domain and seemingly a domain expansion. At bare minimum, these allow him to block against other domain expansions as well as allow for his curse technique to hit without fail. Keep in mind, Yuji still has all of his abilities from before, hitting 7 consecutive black flashes, top tier base physicals, and everything he does is now further enhanced by his capacity to hit the soul directly. As for his scaling now, while Yuji is clearly weaker than Sukuna, since awakening he's essentially performed the best in a 1v1 scenario against him, besides like obviously Gojo. Though this is due in part to how fatigued Sukuna is, both from all of his fights, as well as the repeated hits from Yuji, weakening his cursed energy output and physical control. Still, to perform at this level against Sukuna like this clearly requires special grade level abilities, and Yuji has truly beaten the bagless allegations. But is it enough to beat Yuta? Let's get into it. Starting with base form Yuta, there are definitely misconceptions about his character and his strength. Even without Rika, it's directly stated that Yuta by himself earned a special grade status via training, already immediately putting him above every modern day sorcerer, aside from the other 3 special grades by definition. Therefore, Rika is just an additional buff and an expansion of his abilities rather than something like a Super Saiyan transformation that pushes Yuta, who is like maybe a grade 1, into special grade. Oddly, there are several contentious strength debates with base Yuta compared to other top tiers. The first is his statement regarding Hikari being stronger than himself when on a roll, but honestly, that's an entire separate video topic that doesn't matter here. The second is if he's actually stronger than Kenjaku or not, as he seems to blitz and one-shot a Kenjaku who had just finished fighting Takaba. Again, neither of these matchups really changed the result of the fight against Yuji, so we can mostly ignore them. Like I just alluded to before, Yuta is missing a majority of his abilities without Rika manifested, as without Rika he cannot use his his curse technique or domain expansion. Still, this doesn't mean Yuta has nothing. He still has what is considered bottomless reserves of cursed energy by Kenjaku and has RCT, though it seems to bottom out relatively fast as RCT uses up measurable portions of his cursed energy reserves according to Ryu. Unfortunately, by the time of the final arc, Yuta really doesn't fight anyone relevant to this topic in his base form. Like, there's really no way to make a scaling chain between Kenjaku and Yuji, for example, leaving it unquantifiably below all the feats of Yuta and Rika, who again is just Yuta with more cursed energy, cursed tools, and his copied curse techniques. In my honest opinion, if Yuta and Yuji were to fight without Rika, while Yuji would obviously not have as much cursed energy, their outputs would at worst be similar, and Yuji just has way more versatile abilities and can heal himself infinitely more than Yuta can. So it's likely that unironically, Yuji would just outlast Yuta at worst and just easily outbox and beat him down at best. Yuta with Rika is another story entirely, as Yuta now makes the fight a 2 versus 1 with Rika, but even by himself, he now has more cursed energy, access to curse tools, his curse technique, and his domain. This gives Yuta access to abilities like Curse Speech, Jacob's Ladder, Sukuna's Cleave, Sky Manipulation, Conditional Precognition, and some kinds of Shikigami manipulation, among others. Within his domain, he can use all of these abilities limitlessly as long as he picks up a katana with the ability contained within it. Within the domain, he also would get a natural amp to his stats like a video game, as told to us by Gojo. So, does anything change? Obviously, this is going to be a more difficult fight for Yuji, but I still think he wins. This is for a couple reasons. Firstly, from a pure stat standpoint, Yuji is still both faster and stronger than Yuta is. Even before Awakening, Yuji was essentially the same speed as Yuta and Rika within the domain, meaning that outside of Yuta's domain, Yuji should just have an objective advantage in stats. In other words, a weaker Yuji scales the same as Yuta when amped to his max. Furthermore, after Awakening, Yuji also has both punches and dismantles that can attack the soul directly. As we know from his fight against Mahito, the soul is contained within the body and is essentially a separate HP bar from your physical health, meaning that you can be defeated by having your soul HP reduced to 0 even if your physical body is fine. This has also been ignoring the fact that Yuta's domain and team up with Rika only lasts 5 minutes, so even if he can somehow survive against Yuji in that time period, the moment he runs out, Yuji is just fighting base Yuta again and is cleaving his soul or black flashing him in the chest. Yuta's absolute best chance is domain expansion and just overwhelming Yuji with things like Jacob's Ladder, but Yuji can expand his own domain, or potentially just blitz Yuta before he can take advantage of the domain itself by grabbing a katana. And given that he's faster, Yuji might be the one opening his domain before Yuta does. Finally, there's Six Eyes Yuta in Gojo's body. Firstly, I think it's pretty clear that this Yuta does not scale to original Gojo. We repeatedly are told he's not used to using Gojo's abilities, and purely from his feat standpoint, from getting outboxed by Fatigue Sukuna to having his purple do essentially no meaningful damage, I think it's pretty clear that he's not as strong as original Gojo. Still though, I'm not exactly confident that Yuji would win in a domain clash against Unlimited Void or survive its full duration using Simple Domain, as while Six Eyes Yuta lasts less than 5 minutes, Yuji barely lasted 99 seconds and gets an incomplete Domain of Shrine. However, if you think Yuji can last or avoid this domain, then he could simply win through attrition. So there you have it. In pretty much every scenario, I think Itadori has completely surpassed Yuta in pretty much every important scaling metric. He's come a long way from being one shot by a single stab. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you to my members who saw this video early. Your support is super appreciated. And besides that, let me know how I was wrong in the comments down below. See ya!